Jesus loved the little children, all the children of the world.
Red, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world.
And we love you too. Are you glad to be back tonight? Yeah. I'm not sure. Are you glad to be back tonight? This little Christian light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little Christian light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little Christian light of mine, I'm going to let it shine all the time, let it shine. Won't let Satan get out. I'm going to let it shine. Won't let Satan get out. I'm going to let it shine. Won't let Satan get out. I'm going to let it shine all the time, let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm going to let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm going to let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I'm going to let it shine all the time, let it shine. I believe you. All right. You know, we had such a smoking hot VBS. The temperature got to 97 today in Carroll County. Isn't that amazing? You don't think we had anything to do with that? Oh. All right, fine then. Yeah, it only takes a spark, you know, at a time like this. What did I do? Oh, I won't put it to 100. Yeah, I'll try to keep it down from 100. If we can do that. Any song requests for now? Yeah? No, that's too early for that. But something a little tamer, maybe? Yeah. The B-I-B-L-E, that's the book for me. I stand alone in the Word of God. The B-I-B-L-E. All right. That's a very good song. Yes. You have one? Sea of Galilee. Yeah, I need someone to help. What do you do? You want to help me? Well, you can help me coordinate it. Come on. It's a sea of Galilee. There's a sea. There's a sea. There's a sea of Galilee. There's a sea. There's a sea. There's a sea of Galilee. There's a boat in the sea of Galilee. There's a boat in the sea of Galilee. There's a boat. There's a boat. There's a boat in the sea of Galilee. There are men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are men. There are men. There are men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are hands on the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are hands on the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are hands. There are hands. There are hands on the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are nets in the hands of the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are nets in the hands of the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are nets. There are nets. There are nets in the hands of the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are fish in the nets in the hands of the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are fish in the nets in the hands of the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee. There are fish. There are fish. There are fish in the nets in the hands of the men in the boat in the sea of Galilee.
You know, I think you'll like that song just so you can watch me.
I'm getting better though. I'm learning.
I think that's why they love it so much.
I'm getting it. All right. Wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came tumbling down. Oh, the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down as the floods came up. The rains came down as
maybe we can sing. Maybe. Oh. It only takes a spark to get fire going, and soon all those around can warm up to its glowing. That's how it is with God's love. Once you experience it, you spread His love to everyone you want to pass it on. You do, don't you? I'm glad you did. Oh, all right. Hey, you got that song up there. But is this the cleaned up version, or is this the one we got from the first one? The what? Just the first one. Just the first verse. Okay, we can do that. I stand to praise you, but I fall to my knees. My spirit is willing, but my flesh is so weak. Like fire, my soul, my spirit is so in the rain. Make me whole, my spirit, oh, look so like fire in my heart. Very good. Hey, y'all are getting really good at that. You like our theme song? Yeah. Did you say that because you think you're supposed to, or you really like that song? You really like that song. Okay. Hey, there's another song about fire. You know the song along the bridge is falling down? You know that one? You ever seen this song before? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Abednego, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, in the fiery furnace. They did not burn at all, burn at all, burn at all. They did not burn at all. Our God saved them. Now y'all knew that one right away. How did you do so well with that? Okay. What other song are we going to have to sing? Who? Booster, 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 long like booster, 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 and booster Bible School. I think you're awake tonight. That's good. I'm glad you're excited about classes. Because we'll be learning a wonderful lesson tonight. Some of you will be studying about Elijah and a fiery chariot. Some of you will be studying about a burning bush. And some of you will be studying about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how God saved them from the fire. So we're going to have some interesting lessons. Some of you are going to be studying about the fire that was present on the day of Pentecost with the apostles, and the Holy Spirit had come upon them. So that's going to be quite interesting. And so I hope that when you go to class, you'll come back and you'll tell me a little bit of something that you learned. Can you do that? You're going to take copious notes, right? So we're going to have a new award tonight. I just made it up. The Worst Behaved Award. And the award for the worst behaved is you get to vacuum and clean up, and you don't get slapped.
That sounds like a very good.
That sounds like a good incentive, doesn't it? Sounds like the stick part, but I guess we'll stick with the carrot part of the cake, whichever. So that's just an idea. You don't think about that for next year, right? You don't think it would work? Huh? What? That's not real popular? Oh. So who's going to be the best behaved tonight? Okay. Who's going to have the biggest class tonight? I think the adults are going to have something to say. celebrating it anyway. So, yeah. It's your birthday. Are you 37? Yeah. I didn't think so. Oh, wow. Double digits. 10. Okay, look. When we come back, y'all remind me we have to sing happy birthday to these folks, okay? Can you do that? No. I appreciate the help. All right. So we're going to have a prayer, and I think Jordan is old enough now to lead us in that prayer. So he's going to lead us in a prayer, but be very quiet. Go to your class. Learn something. Enjoy yourself. And know this. We're glad you're here. Glad to be here? Yes. Glad you're here. All right. Let's bow our heads and pray.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you now, thankful for this opportunity you give us to all come together and learn more about your will. Please be with us in our classes and help us to learn. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Amen. Pray roll
I'm laughing. So
good. Daniel 3 is our study tonight.
yes.
I don't know if I told y'all this story or not. We went out to eat with Robin and Bruce Black, and while we're enjoying their company, Robin said, he's a good teacher. And I said, really? He said, yes. If you were here last night, you know that what she said is absolutely true. What an outstanding lesson we had last night. I appreciate Brother Black, appreciate that lesson. Very timely, needed, well presented, and I'm very thankful for it. We're going to be looking at Daniel 3 tonight. Before we get to chapter 3, I want to kind of just start with a few verses in chapter 1. I know we're all familiar with these 3 Hebrew children, that we call them young men. We say children. How old exactly, I don't know. They were involved in the political affairs in Babylon, so they had some age on them. I don't know if they're 37 or not, but they might have been somewhere around that age, or younger, probably, no doubt. In chapter 1, we read the book of Daniel in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God. God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. And the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. Daniel purposed in his heart he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to the steward whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with them and in this matter, and tested them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of delicacies and the wine that they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill and all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. I just wanted to kind of give you a background, if you will, to who these men are that we're studying tonight, chapter 3. They, of course, were among the captives that were torn from their homeland and taken to a foreign land, where they're now being groomed to serve the king, the king that has conquered them. And as you can see, as has been borne out here, they were good-looking men. They were intelligent, bright, skillful men. They were to be useful in the king's service. There's a term that's used in this first chapter, and it's a term that we don't use all the time. I think we know what it means, but I think we all know what a eunuch is, do we not? Okay, well, these men were not born eunuchs. They were made eunuchs, and they were made so because they were slaves. Now, again, it's important that we keep in mind who these men are and under what conditions they are having to serve. They're having to serve this foreign king, and they're serving him as eunuchs. I don't know what kind of anesthesia they had in those days, if any at all. I don't think it was as barbaric as we sometimes make it out to be, but I just can't imagine the pain just associated with being made a eunuch and how that might make a person feel. How you would, I mean, you literally have ripped me of my manhood, and so now I'm having to serve you. And yet we see in these 4 men nothing but pure submission to their training, with this great exception. They wouldn't eat the delicacies, and they wouldn't drink the wine that the king served them. Now, why do you suppose they would make such a stance? Why are they not eating the king's delicacy? You would think a king would have the best of the best, wouldn't you? And they're asking for vegetables. I'd love to have some vegetables right now. That'd be great. And we had tacos, and that was good. I appreciate the taco we had tonight. There's nothing better than vegetables and cornbread. I go for some good vegetables right now. Me too, but you know. Why do you suppose they didn't eat the king delicacies? Why oppose it? Very likely it was meat that had been offered to idols. Or it may have been pig. It may have been something else that, according to the law of Moses, they could not eat. So it is fascinating whether we say it's because it wasn't kosher or because it was offered to a fake deity. Whichever the case, or both, they're making it clear they're not going to compromise their principles. So that's the first thing you see. They're good-looking men. They're now eunuchs, but they're good-looking men. They're smart men, but they're men who will not compromise. They won't back down on their principles. And keep in mind, this is fairly early on in the captivity period. It's even before the time that Ezekiel would be brought here. Now, there's something else I want to just kind of mention before we get to chapter 3, and that is these men, as you can see just from this brief description, were godly men. They were men who were not willing to compromise, even on dietary questions. I mean, you would think somebody's been ripping their homeland. You might be thinking, well, God wants us over here. I guess we'll have to eat the food they're going to serve, and they're going to treat us this way. I mean, some people would be inclined probably to be bitter and maybe just give up on their religious conviction. Not these men. They just sustained it right along. And yet, look where they are, and look what's happened to them. When you think about the captivity, we kind of think about it in terms of they were all bad and they were all wicked people. Well, the vast majority of them were. But there were a lot of good people, righteous people, that suffered right along with all those wicked people. I mean, these men are suffering some of the worst indignities a man could possibly suffer. And yet, they haven't given up on their Lord or haven't given up on their faith. I find that rather instructive and interesting as it pertains to these three young men. There's a question that you probably are going to have. I have, always had. Maybe you have some insight into it. But we have Daniel in chapter 1, and we have Daniel in chapter 2, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But in chapter 3, Daniel's not there. We don't read anything about Daniel. In chapter 4, of course, Daniel's back and they're gone. I don't think that really means anything per se. I just always found it interesting. Why was Daniel, he's mentioned in chapter 1 with these three, and they're called the four, and yet here in chapter 3, it's just the three. And so where's Daniel? I don't know. That's a good question. But I know for a fact it doesn't mean he was willing to compromise and bow before this image. But I don't know. One of those questions I guess we'll have to ask the Lord when that time is given to us. Chapter 3, we're going to read about three young men that took a stand. And if there is a text in the Old Testament that speaks desperately to this generation, any more than this chapter, I don't know what it is. This chapter is a quintessential chapter, I believe. These three young men and their uncompromising stance for truth is exactly the lesson that we need, our whole generation needs today. And I'm going to say more about that in just a moment. Let's look at chapter 3 and just see what happened. By the way, we won't read it, but what happened in chapter 2? Anybody want to quickly tell me that? What happened in chapter 2? I'm sorry? The head, okay, the image, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And you're the head of gold, he said. I had to make him feel pretty good, I guess. Kind of puffed him up a little bit. But it's interesting because I thought about Brother Black's lesson last night. ago I was listening to that Scottish woman read chapter 2 again. It's so cool. I don't have a Scottish accent, but it's really interesting. I don't know her name. I didn't get her name. Anyway, y'all tune into her, but it just sounds better when she's reading it. But anyway, in chapter 2, I was listening to her just on the way to church tonight, or the church building, and she was describing these things in a way that only, I think, a Scottish person could say it. But anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I will say this about chapter 2. Daniel is just one of many eunuchs, no doubt, in Nebuchadnezzar's service. And there was a point at which Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar, there's no one, just like the other wise men had said, no one can fulfill the request that you're making to interpret a dream you're not even going to tell us about. No one's ever been asked to do that, and I'm not able to do that. Only God can do that. And so I thought about, any old eunuch would do, or any old servant of the king would do. And it's really, because it's not about the eunuch, it's not about Daniel, it's about the power of God once again. And so in chapter 2, he tells him, you're the head of gold, and then he describes the other kingdoms that will arise. Very likely because he had heard this dream interpreted, it went to, pardon the pun, went to his head, and he decided to erect a 90-foot high statue of himself. 9 feet wide, 90 feet tall. It was covered in gold, and he's expecting everyone to bow before him. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, with 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery and symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. By the way, before we continue reading, you probably have some keen insight now into what really is motivating these Chaldeans to bring this charge. They are not happy that these Jews have been so highly favored, and they were highly favored in the latter part of chapter 1. We didn't read all of that. And the latter part of chapter 2 because of the interpretation incident. They were highly favored and given high status, and they resented it. These are foreigners, and you put them in high position. And so you notice how they're making this malicious accusation. There are certain Jews whom you've set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you're ready at the time, you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, True, O king. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel, delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language but speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. The king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. You know, I like VBS. It's always one of the highlights of the year for me. I feel like I'm probably a little too old to be doing my part in it. I mean, it's time for someone younger, maybe, to come up here. And I'm kind of jealous of it because I love watching the faces of these kids. But, you know, I like VBS for one particular reason. A lot of good doors of opportunity, evangelistic doors, are open to us at VBS. And not just VBS, but every time we have Bible class. You know, one of the #1 groups in the local church that recruits and brings new blood into the church, #1 would be kids. That's right, in our Bible class. Bringing their friends. Bringing somebody with them to Bible class. And from there we find them coming, their families eventually coming. I mean, we have wonderful opportunities. My point is this. I don't know how young these men were. We say they're 3 Hebrew children. They weren't children. They were young men, obviously. But what a powerful work they accomplished in Babylon. The same is true with our young people today. We tend to dismiss them because we say, well, they just run around and knock people down and make a mess. And, You know, we just want to whip them and beat them all the time. Well, they do a lot. They got energy, and we don't. We're jealous, probably. That's why we whip them, because you got energy, I don't have it. I want some of it. Give me some. So we whip them because we'll have the energy they have. I don't know, but the point is, these kids have tremendous potential to do great good in the church. And we see the great good these young men are doing in the stance, the uncompromising stance that they took. I mean, this is really a remarkable account. Now, I want you to think about the situation they found themselves in. And I want you to be honest with yourself. You don't have to tell me or speak out loud, but I want you to think about what I'm about to discuss with you. I love sociology as a subject when I was in college. In fact, it was my favorite class. The only class the teacher ever said I aced. And I didn't have to study for my class. I just naturally liked the study of human behavior. And so I love sociology. It's fascinating to me. But one of the things that fascinates me and infuriates me at the same time about human behavior is what's often referred to as the herd mentality. Now, when I say herd mentality, what does that mean? How do you understand that term or that expression? Herd mentality. Follow the crowd. What everybody's doing. Now, when you're younger, the reason we do that when we're preteens or teens, we kind of follow the crowd. We get that herd mentality because we're looking for our place in the world. We're trying to figure out who we are and where we fit and what we should do. And we want other people to like us. We want to be part of the in crowd. We don't want to be, made fun of or ostracized. We don't want to be on the outside. We want to be on the inside. So that's just natural. It's human behavior. The problem is we don't really get over it. We carry it with us into adulthood. So we go to work, and while we're at work one day, we're talking and just having a conversation, and you say something simple, it's off the top of your head, and no big deal to you, and somebody, oh, I can't believe you said that. You have to be careful what you say anymore. You can't say hardly anything anymore without checking the latest, politically correct, dictionary. Can I say that? Can I talk about boys and girls anymore? I mean, can we even use pronouns like that? I mean, we have to be careful what we say because if you don't follow the crowd, I mean, HR is going to call you in. They're going to sit you down, and they're going to rip you a new one. And who knows? You may get brought up so many times you lose your job. I mean, it's a serious matter. I mean, this is not play stuff. This is real life. And I got to pay my bills, and I need that insurance policy they're providing me. I mean, got a lot of things to consider here. So, I'm just not going to say anything. When 9 times out of 10, what that group needs desperately to hear is a child of God to speak up and say, that's ridiculous. Let's get back to the basic and common sense and just start preaching and teaching basic truths like there are differences in boys and girls. And marriage is a wonderful, noble, God-given institution. And it should not be disparaged and made fun of, and it should not be redefined. I mean, we can just start with the basics. Those are controversial subjects. I'm sure that when these 3 young men were confronted with the decree, you bow or you burn, that wasn't just the burning that they were considering. They had just been promoted. I mean, they're highly favored by the king. And so if we don't bow to his image, we're going to fall out of favor with the king. As Christians, what this should remind us of is that whenever we seek to please men, if that's our driving goal, we cannot be the servant of Christ. How many preachers today are derelict in their duty to preach the gospel, the whole gospel, and nothing but the gospel? They're derelict. Why? Because I don't want to offend people. I don't want to run people off. I mean, what are we saying to ourselves these days? Now, I don't want to make people mad. I want to be part of the in crowd. So I'm going to do whatever I have to do, say whatever I have to say or not say to please people. Paul said to the Galatian church, if I would please men, I could not be the servant of Christ. He was talking about an uncompromising stance in that instance on the question of circumcision, which was plaguing the early church at that time. And there were many that were saying, we have to be circumcised, keep the law in order to be justified before God. And Paul said, we're not doing that. We can't do that, because the minute we do that, then the truth of the gospel will fail to have its effect. When I said earlier, this chapter, this account, these three young men, is probably the most desperately needed lesson of our day. I'm going to say it again. We need to stop with this sophomoric mentality of, I want everybody to like me, and I don't want nobody saying they mean about me. We need to get to the point where, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I've got my principles, and I'm going to stand on them. And if I lose my job, if I lose my friends, if my family won't have me over for Thanksgiving, or whatever happens, let it happen. I mean, you do realize that in our society today, we are rapidly approaching the time when preachers and churches are going to be fined if they preach certain things. And they're going to be told, you can't have your tax-exempt status. That's where it starts, and then it goes from there to, you keep preaching that way and using that kind of hate speech, quote unquote, we're going to throw you in jail. So what do we do? I mean, and I know you said, now that it's happening in Canada already. It's happening in Canada all the time. And it's growing in popularity there, and it's moving south. It won't be long until, well, you know what's going to happen. Maybe the next election, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen, and we're going to have to wind up facing the reality. But what do? We're going to try to just get along? We're going to try to compromise? Well, think about it this way. If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like a lot of people today, they said, well, we could just take a knee, tie our sandals or something. I'm tie my sandal real quick, then I'll get back up, and I don't have to mean it. It doesn't mean anything in my heart. Just going to go through the gesture. I mean, better do that and it cause all this controversy. I just don't want all this hoopla. I want to call attention to myself. When you listen to what they said, this is powerful. Notice what they said. And there's two things. They expressed unwavering faith in two things. Number one, the God we serve is well able to deliver us. That's number one. I have no worry about that. But number two, they had unwavering faith in the will of God. Whether He delivers us or not, whether He chooses to deliver us or not, we will not bow to your image. Why? You shall have no other gods before me. They knew this. They lived by those words. They took them to heart. And so they were saying, we believe in this stuff. Now, it didn't make Nebuchadnezzar very happy. Can you imagine? This guy, literally, he's full of himself. There's no other way to say it. He's full of himself. No doubt, many suggest, and probably right, that this image was created as a spin-off from the dream that he had and the interpretation that was given to him. And he wasn't satisfied with the head being of gold, the whole thing gold. It's me. I'm Nebuchadnezzar. I'm the whole thing gold, and everybody going to worship me. You talk about a megalomaniac. This guy literally wants people to bow before his image. Thought a lot of himself. And these three Jewish men that he's just promoted, been treating them well, let them get by with not eating his food and drinking his wine. Didn't say anything about that. Let them have their way. But look how defiant they are. After I've treated them so well, and you can just see the look on his face, hear the tone in his voice. He's enraged. And so let's just throw them into the fire. It's interesting. He gave them a chance. I wondered, why would he do that? Well, I don't know. Maybe it could be a number of reasons. Maybe because they were officials and they were, recently promoted by him. And how's that going to make him look in his judgment, having appointed these men? Now they're going to throw them in the fiery furnace. I don't know. But here it is. He's enraged. So let's get it 7 times hotter. I think it's an idiomatic way of saying, make it hot as you can. Just heat it up. It was so hot that the men responsible for throwing them into that furnace were killed. That's hot. That's hot. That's almost like being outside this afternoon. I mean, that's hot. You can stay out there long, stand it, but you only think about those guys. They were just doing what they were told to do. The king, they died trying to fulfill. But here they are, bound in their clothes, their turban. They got it all on. All of their official garb, it's all on. And they're thrown in the fire. Why would they keep them clothed? Normally they strip people naked and throw them in. But no, they got their clothes on. Why? Because it's combustible. It can burn a lot faster. And I'm angry. And I want them to suffer. Whether he delivers us or not, we won't bow to your enemy. You know, I think in the back of our mind when we're struggling with this herd mentality, and we all struggle with it. We all do. All of us. We're honest. It affects all of us. I think when Paul wrote what he did, he was acknowledging that thought had crossed his mind of just wanting to please people. Of course it crossed his mind, but it didn't stay there. It wasn't what was the operating principle with him, but it crossed his mind. Maybe if I just, don't say anything when this group shows up, preaches circumcision. I'm circumcised. What's the big deal? I mean, it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, you could have compromised just to get along. No, can't do that. Not going to do that. And I think we all struggle with this tendency, this desire to be accepted and not make waves, not be ostracized. I think in the back of our minds, we feel like no good. Nothing good will come from my being obstinate. I might as well go along. Not going to change anything anyway. I can't tell you the number of times I've had people say those very words to me. Can't stop it anyway. Might as well just let it go. Why make an issue of it? It's just going to happen. Well, a lot of the reason it's just going to happen is because good people aren't saying anything. We're not taking a stand. We've just decided to just get along. Whatever happened, let it happen. I mean, we have to come to realize that if we're going to be the salt of the earth, if we're going to be the light of the world, we've got to take a stand. We've got to tell the world, we ain't going there. We're not going to do that. That's not right. But now, notice what was the actual outcome. Notice how he words it. When he saw, he could see into the furnace. Some say it was like a big pit, and they threw him in the pit, and some say it was like an actual oven, and I don't know. I don't know what these furnaces look like or how they were constructed. I do know that you could see in them, obviously, because he could see. And he's blown away. He's astonished. He's like, didn't we throw 3 men in there bound? And yet, there's 4 men, and they're loose. That's interesting, isn't it? Why would God let them go into the fire? Sometimes I find myself asking that question. God, why didn't you just put the fire out? Why did you make me go through the fire? I didn't want to go through that. I don't want to live through that. But one of the most wonderful thoughts, and it was brought up again in our class last night, he might let me go into that fire, but I'm not going alone. He's coming with me. Isn't that a wonderful thought? I'm with you. I'm not going to leave you in there by yourself. But here's the beauty of it. They're bound, and now they're loose. They actually found freedom in taking a stance. Again, in our minds, herd mentality being what it is, human beings, we're not real smart, we're like sheep. That's what God says. All we like sheep have gone astray. We're stupid. I mean, I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm being brutally honest. That's God's description of it. We're like sheep. We're not real bright. So we get caught up in this herd mentality. because we think, that's going to set me free. That herd is bound together by the chains of all this fear and angst and anxiety that they use to keep each other bound to one another, to kind of, I guess, give some kind of credibility to their thought or their belief or their practice. True freedom is found when you break away and say, I'm not part of that. I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm not going to compromise. I'm going to stand with God. I'm going to do the right thing. And God blesses me with freedom. Now, one commentator I looked at on Nebuchadnezzar and his pronouncement, and one looks like the Son of God. It is an interesting translation. It's translated differently. Your old King James translates it a little different. But one guy said, well, it's not possible that he actually said those words because, well, he's Nebuchadnezzar, he's a pagan. He couldn't have known about the true God. What makes you think he didn't know about the one true God? He knew these Jews. He had known them for at least 3 years. He's heard something about the one true God. He refers to him as the Most High God. Rex Turner said many years ago, I remember he taught the book of Daniel. By the way, I have his book. If you don't have his book on Daniel, you need to get his book on Daniel. It's best, I think, that's available anywhere. That was kind of his forte. That was his expertise. He spent a lot of time in Daniel. But he said something interesting one time. I never really thought about this. But when you read about Nebuchadnezzar, you're reading about a pagan king, typical pagan king, despot king. He got this megalomaniac mentality. I'm this great deity. Y'all worship me, follow me. But there's an evolution in his thought. And you see it borne out, beginning in chapter 1, all the way to chapter 4. In fact, remember when God humbled him because he became very arrogant. What happened when you have power and you have unlimited power? It goes to your head and kind of makes you crazy. What's that? Pride. Yeah, he's full of it. So he's standing on the balcony looking out at his kingdom, chapter 4, and look what I've done. Look at this vast kingdom that I have. So God did something to him, altered him physically, mentally. He lost his mind. And he's out in the field eating grass. I mean, here's the king. Long fingernail, and it's a creepy thing when you think about what happened to him. But while he's there eating the grass, a thought occurred to him. God rules in the kingdoms of men, and he gives it to whomever he chooses. In other words, he realized, he was acknowledging in that, I'm where I'm at today because God put me here. I'm here because God wanted me to be here. It's God's will that I'm here. And again, you look at the end of that chapter, and everything he said suggests, I think Rex Turner was right, a full-scale conversion. This man was converted. Now, how did that conversion come to pass? Well, it started when 3 young men would not compromise. When you think about our herd mentality causing us to compromise because we want to get along, because we think sometimes, and we've actually heard people arguing this when it comes to evangelism, if we just get along a little more and try to be more like, and et cetera, just go with the flow, we'll win more people. I think it was Leroy Brownlow. I heard him, the only time I've ever heard Leroy Brownlow in person. Fred Harmon lectured many years ago. He was talking about the liberal train. He had a way of illustrating his thoughts pretty well, but talking about the liberal train, and he said that liberal train, that was the very thought then. We're gonna pack the church with all bunch of big piles of dry pine straw. It's wonderful, and we're gonna take a match. We're gonna light it, and it's just gonna light up, and it's gonna be a huge blaze. And how long does pine straw burn? Not very long. You see, we need to get that oak wood out. We need to build us some real fires. We need to stoke the flames of true, undefiled religion. And he was talking about getting back to the basics. Let's don't get away from that. Let's don't get caught up in the hysteria. Let's just try to get along so we get more people to come in. In the long run, it does not pay It does not work. The gospel cannot succeed if we're trying to transform in the likeness of the world. We're to be transformed into the image of Christ. And we're not to be conformed to the world. We're running counter culture. And that's what these men did. And because they did it, not only was the Jewish religion allowed to sustain itself while the 70 years of captivity prevailed, and they were early in the captivity period, so they've got it now where it's a legal, recognized religion in this pagan society, which allowed them to have synagogues where they could worship and maintain their knowledge of God, and eventually, after 70 years, a group of them, a righteous remnant, would go back to Jerusalem and would start all over again. And eventually, we would find Jesus back in the world that he made in Jerusalem, in the very place where these people have now returned. It started again with 3 young men who said, we're not going to compromise. We're going to take our stand. I was reading about Polycarp earlier. Any of you familiar with Polycarp? I know you've heard the name. Somebody had a bad day. Anyway, by the way, I'm changing the subject. Does anybody know what happened on Interstate 20 before we started VBS tonight? I mean, all the traffic was rerouted to 78. I don't know.
Car caught on fire, so
A car did?
I think.
That's terrible. I hope. Anyway. I always hate to hear the helicopter fly over because I know what's going on. But anyway, I think it was the year 155 AD, I mean, mid-2nd century. And this old man, he was one of the elders of the church at Smyrna. And there was a growing tension with the Christian community in the Roman world at that time. This is just prior to Diocletian's, mass murder of Christians. But I mean, before that actually took place, there was the sentiment growing in pockets here and there. And in around the area of Smyrna, people were just sick of these atheists. By the way, that's what Romans called Christians. They're atheists. And they were called atheists because they denied the gods. It was Polycarp who said as they were taking him to the flames, you're the real atheist because you deny the one true God. But anyway, that was how they looked at Christians. By the way, they didn't think very highly of Christians. They called them men haters. Today they just say, you're using hate speech. It's the same spirit, the same attitude. Nothing has changed. And so they hear us preaching about loving our fellow man, sacrificing for our fellow man, wanting to take our fellow man to heaven. You hate me! I mean, it's crazy. And you know the world is crazy. They've lost their minds because they're in darkness, have no idea what's going on. They can't see what's in front of them. That's why we have to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We have to be like Polycarp. There were people that were being rounded up and they were being put to death, many of them. Well, they advised Polycarp, you need to go hide off. He's an old man. He's in his 80s, late 80s. And they're like, you need to go find a place to hide. So we went to a farmhouse. Never hiding out in a farmhouse, but they found out where he was. Somebody ratted him out. So here they come with their, force to pick him up. And he didn't run. God will be done. But he invited them all to come in, according to tradition. He invited them all to come in and have a meal. And he had this wonderful prayer for all of them and for their safety as they were traveling back to execute him. So they were all moved. They were all touched. And immediately they all start trying to plead with him. No, look, just acknowledge Caesar. Come on now, just acknowledge Caesar. I mean, what's the big deal? It's kind of like, just take a knee. You don't have to mean it. Just say it. Just say it. He wouldn't say it. And so they carry him to the arena. And they kept on. Apparently, he just had this effect on people. He was a likable guy. He was an old guy, an old man. He was praying for everybody that's persecuting him, and he's speaking good words to them, encouraging them to obey the gospel. And I want to sit down and have a Bible study with you, that kind of thing. And they're going to kill him. Of course, there's an arena there, and he said, look, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm a Christian. And when that was said, one of the heralds in the arena, he said, I'm a Christian. He said, I'm a Christian. Kill the atheist. And so they started chanting, kill the atheist. And they burned him. And of course, people were begging him to renounce. You've heard that saying, I don't remember word for word, but paraphrasing, I've served him so many years and he's never betrayed me. How could I betray him now? And of course, you're threatening me with the flames that last for a while and afterward are quenched, but I'm warning you about the flames that will never be quenched. And they put him to death. Polycarp was one of those individuals we still talk about today because, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he wouldn't back down. He wouldn't compromise. He would not betray his principle. And it made an impression on the world. By the way, you notice what happened to them after this? They were promoted. They got another promotion. And their religion was now recognized. There's so many wonderful things you could say about these three young men. I'm going to say it again. If there's a lesson our young people need today, more than any other, I don't know what it could possibly be. Because, as well as I do, we live in a world where, hey, everybody does. Everybody knows it. Who's everybody? I've never met everybody. I don't know. But everybody's doing it. Everybody thinks it. Everybody knows it. I don't. I didn't get the memo, and I'm not going to follow it. And we don't have to follow it just because everybody's doing it. What we need to concern ourselves with is, what does God want us to do? And what's right? And what does the world need? Thoughts or comments? I know you're thinking about that Twinkie bar back there. I see the look on your face. Anybody? It's just Tuesday night. It's not that late yet. Going once. Going twice. All right, let's go get a Twinkie. Thank y'all.